Welcome to part 5. This one is memorizing your checklist. So a big thing in aviation is actually being able to perform the checklist when you need them. Now they are checklists, so you are supposed to review them regardless of whether you have them memorized or not. But in the case of your emergency checklist, I want you to just have them memorized, do the motions, and if there is time, double check it. If there is not time, focus on flying the plane. We always say aviate, navigate, and then communicate. So first thing will always be flying the plane. Then the second thing is navigating and communicating. So that would leave checklists after all those three things. So we do want to use the checklist as a double check every time, but if we don't have time, it helps a lot to have them memorized already. And it will also save you from overthinking in the plane when you're just trying to learn how to fly rather than trying to remember what it says on the checklist versus actually flying the plane. Now, one of the things we do to help is called chair flying. It is where you get essentially a picture of the cockpit and you will just sit in front of, put up the cockpit picture on the wall, sit with a chair, and you just run through the motions of the checklist. You go through everything on the checklist, you can run through maneuvers, you can do it for a lot, but today, in this video, we're gonna focus on the checklist. So, I want you to memorize every single checklist. In your welcome email, you'll have received the checklist already. I want to get you a picture of the cockpit. I want you to print that off. I want you to sit in front of it, and I want you to run through those checklists over and over and over until it's second nature. Now, there are some things outside of just checklists that you also need to memorize, and I have them written up here. So the first one we're going to talk about here is pair. So this is for spin recovery. A spin is when you stall the plane, which we talked about what a stall was in the last video. You've already done ground school, so you should know what a spin is. But a spin is an uncoordinated stall. And when we end up in it, hopefully we never do, but if we do, we need to know how to react. And what we're going to do is pair, which is power idle, so pull the power all the way back. Ailerons neutral, that means let go of the stick. Rudder opposite the spin, so if we're spinning to the right, we want left rudder. If we're spinning to the left, we want right rudder. And then elevator forward. And what you're doing there is you're essentially pushing it down so that you can break that stall now that you've stopped the spin. So rudder opposite stops the spin, elevator forward breaks the stall, and then you'll slowly pull back to recover from that spin. Another important one is safety. Safety is going to be for your passenger briefing. This one isn't necessarily a checklist, but it is an acronym that I want you to remember. And since it's something I want you to memorize, we put it in the memorized checklist section. So this is when you're telling your passengers ahead of time what to expect and rules of the road, what they should know. Rules of the sky, I guess would be a better way to put it. So S is for seatbelts, A is for air vents, F is for fire equipment, E is for emergency exits, T is for talk and traffic, and Y is your questions. Now, an R plane, it's done a little bit differently. So, a briefing in R plane would sound like this. Your seatbelts will be found in both of these chairs. You will wear them the entire time. They're kind of put on like a backpack. They come up and over your shoulders, and then you strap in down on your waist, and you can tighten on either side or in the shoulder area. Air vents. There are 2 air vents, one on each door. Fire equipment. We do not have any fire equipment on board. Emergency exits. There are 2 emergency exits in the event that we lose an engine or we have to make an emergency landing off airport. We are going to crack those doors so that if for any reason we crash or there's bumps, it doesn't bend and lock us in here in the event of a fire, and that way we're not trapped in during a fire or just trapped in general. It's going to make our life a lot more miserable. So we're going to make sure we don't do that. Next is T, talk in traffic. So talk in traffic means we use what's called a sterile cockpit rule, which means no talking during the critical phases of flight. That's taxi, takeoff, and landing. But you also want to add, if you see something, say something. Don't assume that I see something. Always mention it if it looks like it's a safety hazard. And then you ask them, do you have any questions? Now, something that I typically add on with students and with people who have never flown in my plane. For students, I say, we are going to use a 3-way exchange of flight controls today. You have the controls, I have the controls, you have the controls. And then we also talk about the parachute, because we do have a BPRS system, which is a ballistic rescue system, inside the plane. And so what that means for us is that we can use a parachute to grip the whole plane airframe and bring us down nice and gently. So what I tell people who've never flown, I say, if I become incapacitated for any reason, what I want you to do is first try and wake me back up. Don't do this immediately. Try and wake me back up, get me back. If you cannot, and you do not feel like you're comfortable trying to figure out how to land the plane, which most people are not, I want you to look right here. Here's the throttle. I want you to pull back all the way on the throttle. I want you to then pull lightly back on the stick. You're going to see the airspeed indicator, and I'll point to the airspeed indicator, decreasing. As soon as that gets below 60, I want you to pull this handle as hard as you can, the red handle, right above us, and a parachute will come out, and then I want you to reach for the ignition key and turn it off. If you don't turn off the ignition, we're gonna be floating around like a powered parachute all day. So make sure you do all those steps, and also be cognizant of where you're going to do this. Because if you do this over a mountainous area, we could just end up in a bad situation anyway, and it might not have helped at all. It might have made things worse. So make sure that you are in a good place to do this. And then I will finally ask, do you have any additional questions? And usually the answer is not at this time. And that is a good passenger briefing, especially for our aircraft. Next you have crack. So C-R-A-A-C-C. Crack is when you're getting ready to do maneuvers. Now we haven't gone over maneuvers yet, but as part of your ground school, I'm sure you've talked at least a little bit about maneuvers at this point. And you will see on your checklist, we have a pre-maneuver checklist. That's going to be a part of this acronym. But this acronym I need you to memorize because it is clearing turns, which is going to be 90 degrees to the left, 90 degrees to the right. The reason we start out to the left is because due to right-of-way rules, traffic that's faster than us would be passing on the right, and we don't want to fly right into them. The next thing we want to do, and while we're making those clearing turns, let me reiterate, we are looking for traffic, we are looking for traffic being other aircraft, we are looking for birds, we're looking for weather phenomenon, anything that's going to cause us a problem as we're doing this maneuver. That's what we're looking for as we're making these turns, not just doing them for fun. The next thing is we got to pick our reference point. So depending on the maneuver, you may or may not have a reference point. At this time is where I would also bug my heading. What does that mean? Well, it means just press in on the heading button and it'll show a little blue thing on the heading you're currently on so that you know where you started this maneuver. Gives you a point of reference, i.e. reference point. And say something like a steep turn, which we'll talk about more when we talk about maneuvers, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be picking a point far out, and that's going to be your reference point. So you would bug your heading and you would pick that reference point and you're on the R. Next is A, airspeed. Make sure you're at the appropriate airspeed to start the maneuver. You don't want to be above maneuvering speed, which we just talked about in the last segment about why that is. And you don't want to be going too slow to where it might be dangerous. Saying like a steep turn when you're banked at 45 degrees, if you're going near stall speed, when you're in a bank, it raises your stall speed, so you want to be cognizant of that. And so we shoot most of our maneuvers here at Deep Sky at 80 knots. All right, next we have altitude. You want to make sure you're at the appropriate altitude. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means for the given maneuver, make sure you're at the appropriate altitude. So stalls, we want to be doing it at least 3,000 feet above the ground level. So if the ground is 1,500, we need to be at least at 4,500 in order to do that maneuver. And you want to make sure that you are abiding by the altitude you've been told by either your instructor or your examiner to maintain. If I tell you maintain 5,500, don't get off to 5,200 and think that's an okay altitude to start the maneuver at. You need to be paying attention at all times. Next, we have our checklist. That's the pre-maneuver checklist that I just talked about. You're going to want to run through that. That's going to consist of turning the fuel pump on, turning the lights on. You're going to have clearing turns in there. You're going to have calls. So it's going to remind you of some of this too. That way we basically have 2 points of reminder. So not only are we running through this acronym we remember, but we're also running through the checklist itself. And the last thing we want to do is we want to make a call. So as we already talked about with the calls, this is going to be a pre-maneuver call. We want to tell people who we are, where we are, and what we plan on doing. So it would sound something like this. Northwest Practice Area, Light Sport 160 Echo Alpha is at 4,500, 2 miles south of Lake Pleasant, practicing steep turns, Northwest Practice Area. And that is what your call is going to sound like. Something that I don't have written on here, but is very important, is going to be your A, B, C, D, E. And this is what happens if you lose your engine. So first, it's going to be airspeed. So the airspeed we want to pitch for, as we talked about in the last one, is going to be traditionally best glide. So let's just say for the sake of this, best glide is always what you're going to pitch for. So you're going to aim for 69 knots. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to look for your best place to land. So A, airspeed, B, best place to land. So we're looking for a field nearby that's going to work so that we can land in it. The next thing that we want to do is we want to pull out our checklist. Now, checklists can be delayed if you're too close to the ground and you don't feel comfortable or think that you have time to go through the checklist. Like I said earlier, you always need to aviate first, right? So you want to fly that plane. Make sure you are safely flying that plane before you do the checklist. D is going to be declare. So you want to go on to 1.5, the emergency frequency, and you want to declare your intentions, or not intentions, declare that you're having an emergency. And that'll be a mayday, mayday, mayday. And then you tell them where you are and what's happening. I'm having an engine failure. I'm going to be landing over here. Mayday, mayday, mayday. And then the last thing we have is E. Some people say execute, some people say ELT. ELT will be on your checklist anyway, but we do ELT just in case you didn't go through the checklist, so that you don't forget to turn it on. It'll also should turn on its own when you hit the ground. As soon as you have 5 Gs of impact, that thing's going to go off anyway, so that shouldn't be a concern. And that is going to be memorizing your checklist, and that is the majority of everything you'll need to know before you solo for checklist wise. Thank you.